Here are 5 things that I wish someone told me before I started advocating for sexual rights. Number 1, sexual rights are human rights, but also sexual rights are actually deeply ingrained in almost every conversation we can have. But something I didn't realize is how intrinsically connected everything is. Specifically, what comes to mind is, for example, recently I've had some really interesting conversations about sexual rights and climate change and how climate change can actually affect the access people have to reproductive health, or even climate change has adverse effects on child marriage, things like that. And I think it's a very interesting aspect of sexual rights. Number 2, just because you learned it one way doesn't mean it's correct. Specifically, what comes to mind when I say this is I, over the years, have had conversations about sexual rights, and we pick up language that we might not even realize we pick up. For example, recently, when talking about people living with HIV, that's something that I've had to kind of make a mental note of putting the person first instead of putting the disease or labeling them as like someone who suffers from this disease or is a patient of this disease. I think it's really interesting to see how subliminal messaging from like societal stigma has seeped into our everyday language that we don't even realize. Number 3, everyone has a story. This one's my favorite thing about this space. When you start advocating for a cause, you are passionate for that cause, obviously, because you're not advocating just to advocate. And I think it's really fun to hear everyone's stories, because I found that sometimes it's not even the facts that really like give me insight and new perspective. It's literally the personal stories and it's the connections that I have to a cause that someone else may have to a cause, and they might differ, but at the end of the day, they both kind of have brought us into the same space, which is really fun. Number 4, sex is just sex. Some days there's gonna be days where you wake up and it'll be great. Like, yes, I can talk about sex all day, every day. Other days, you're gonna be in spaces with people who are academics, people who are professionals, and you get a little scared saying the word sex. Like, it feels a little like I'm doing something wrong, I shouldn't be saying this word. Sex is just sex. We're literally in a space advocating for sexual rights. Don't be afraid to use the word sex. Last thing that I wish someone told me, you need to be creative. Unfortunately, regardless of me saying sex is just sex, sex is taboo. Regardless of how you come into this space, whether you're approaching sex and sexual rights from a rights perspective or a health perspective or even a pleasure perspective, someone will have something to say about the fact that the word sex is in this conversation. They will feel a certain way, they will be turned off by it. So in order to get past the resistance you're going to face, you have to get creative. These are just 5 things that I wish I knew before I started advocating for sexual rights, and I think knowing these things equip me to create more compelling messages and really get through to people and really reach the audience that I want to reach.